Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind changes when someone else enters the room? How the body suddenly adjusts, the voice softens or sharpens, the posture becomes a performance as if you must now earn the right to take up space. Have you ever wondered why being misunderstood feels dangerous? Why the idea of someone disliking you stings in a place so deep it's hard to even explain? And why, no matter how much you grow, learn, or evolve, there always seems to be that quiet pull to protect your image, your reputation, your place in someone else's mind? You know the feeling. That subtle tension of living as if every moment is being watched, evaluated, judged. The smile that's slightly too careful, the sentence you don't finish, the part of you that wants to speak but sits back down. It's exhausting, isn't it? It's like carrying the weight of 1,000 invisible eyes. And you've been carrying it for years. This is the silent prison so many of us live in without ever admitting it. The prison of caring what people think, not the small, reasonable kind of care, the social awareness, the compassion, but the deeper, heavier version, the kind where your sense of worth is tied to how well you are received, the kind where your identity becomes a negotiation, the kind where you spend your whole life trying to avoid disappointing others, even at the cost of disappointing yourself. You've learned how to be agreeable, how to be impressive, how to be likable. But somewhere along the way, you forgot how to simply be. And the saddest part is that no one even asked you to disappear. You just assumed you had to. There's a moment in every life where a quiet question begins to whisper, when did I stop choosing myself? When did I begin shaping my existence around the assumptions and expectations of others? And why does their approval feel like oxygen, while their disapproval feels like death? You may not even have the answer, because this didn't begin recently. This started when you were young, when belonging meant survival, when the love you received felt conditional, when the smallest withdrawal of affection felt like danger. And so you learn to adjust, to shape-shift, to make yourself easier to love. But now you are an adult. And yet, the child inside you still fears rejection as if it could end your life. So you chase approval. You avoid conflict. You silence your truth. You wear masks that feel safer than honesty. And the tragedy is that the world never truly sees you, because you have never truly let yourself exist without permission. You are tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep can fix, but the kind that comes from living away from your own center, the kind that comes from constantly managing how you appear instead of simply being who you are. A life lived for the gaze of others is a life spent in exile from yourself. And yet, you didn't come here to be an echo. You didn't come here to be a reflection of someone else's preference. You came here to live fully, unapologetically, and deeply. There is a different way, a quieter, clearer way, a way of choosing yourself first, not out of selfishness, but out of truth. The moment you stop negotiating your worth is the moment life begins to feel real again. You don't have to fight to be understood. You don't have to convince others to approve. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to perform. You are allowed to take up space exactly as you are. This is where the path begins, not by forcing yourself to stop caring, but by remembering who you were before you learned to care so much. The next step is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is a gentle turning inward, a reclaiming, a return. Welcome. We begin now. Number 1, the hidden prison of approval. There is a kind of prison that doesn't have walls, bars, guards, or locks, yet it keeps millions of people confined every single day. It's built not from metal, but from thoughts, not from stone, but from fear. And the first sign that you are living inside it is when you begin to measure your every action by how it will be perceived, rather than how it feels in your own chest. Hidden prison of approval isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It whispers, it persuades, it convinces you that safety lies in making yourself acceptable to others. You start to evaluate your worth through the reactions you receive. A nod means good. Frown means bad. A compliment means you're valuable. Silence means you should try harder. You begin living your life not as a conversation with your own soul, but as a performance in front of an invisible audience you can never fully see. You know this prison intimately. It's in the hesitation before you speak, the rehearsed lines before a conversation, the anxious replays of what you said after it's already over. It's the pressure to maintain an image, a persona, something polished enough to be admired, but stable enough not to provoke discomfort. And so you edit yourself. You soften your truth. You dilute your voice. You shrink your desires. You lower your presence. Not because you don't know who you are, but because you're afraid of what your truth might cost you. It's not that you lack courage. It's that you've been taught that belonging is safer than authenticity, that approval is safer than freedom, that being liked is more important than being real. To care what others think is human. Everything in our biology is designed to keep us connected, to the tribe, to the group, to the ones who can offer protection. But when did the need to belong become a fear of being yourself? When did connection turn into self-abandonment? Somewhere along the line, the desire to be accepted became the fear of being rejected. And rejection started to feel like a threat to your very existence. But the world you fear is not the world you are living in now. You are not a child anymore. You are not at the mercy of someone else's approval to survive. The body still reacts as if judgment is danger. But the danger is illusion. The threat is memory. The fear is old. And here is the heartbreaking truth. When you care too much about what others think, you don't really live among people. You live inside their imagined opinions. You carry around a psychological audience, a crowd that never stops watching, even when you're alone. You live as if your every move is being evaluated. But the reality is far more freeing and far more sobering. Most people are too preoccupied with their own insecurities to truly judge you. They are not thinking about you nearly as often as you think they are. Their minds are busy with their own anxieties, their own self-comparisons, their own wounds, and yet you imprison yourself in the idea of their gaze. You perform for people who aren't even looking. You suffer for expectations no one actually expressed. You seek approval from people who aren't even certain of themselves. And this is the tragedy: you give away your life to ghosts. Imagine judgment, assumed rejection, a story your mind wrote and your soul believed. But somewhere inside you, beneath the layers of conditioning, pleasing, adjusting, and performing, there is a self that remembers what freedom feels like, a self that once laughed without checking if the sound was too loud, a self that once spoke without rehearsing, a self that moved without monitoring, a self that existed without permission. That self has not disappeared. It has simply been waiting, watching, quietly hoping you would notice the bars you placed around your own becoming. The hidden prison of approval loses its power the moment you realize that you built the walls yourself. And anything you built, you can unbuild. Anything you learned, you can unlearn. Anything you surrendered, you can reclaim. The question is not whether freedom is possible. The question is whether you are willing to stop performing long enough to remember who you were before the performance began. There is a reason the fear of judgment feels so deep, so personal, so old. It did not begin in adulthood. It did not begin in your career, your relationships, or your social experiences. It began when you were very young, when your world was small and love was oxygen. In those early years, love was not philosophical. It was survival. You depended on others not just for affection, but for food, shelter, safety, protection. And so your nervous system learned a powerful rule. If they withdraw, I am not safe. Approval became connection. Connection became security, and security became worth. You didn't choose this. It was trained into you before you even had language for it. Think back, not with blame, but with clarity. When you were praised, you felt seen. When you were criticized, you felt threatened. When you disappointed someone you loved, you felt unworthy. When you pleased them, you felt valuable. And slowly, subtly, without ever realizing it, you began constructing a self that was shaped by what others rewarded. You learned what to say to be accepted. You learned what to hide to avoid conflict. You began to monitor your emotions, your desires, your natural impulses, not because they were wrong, but because they were misunderstood. And a child will always choose belonging over truth, because belonging means survival. But that choice does not come without cost. Somewhere in your childhood, there was a moment, maybe small, maybe repeated, maybe silent, when you discovered that being fully yourself was unsafe. Perhaps you were told you were too emotional, too sensitive, too dramatic, too quiet, too stubborn, too much, or not enough, and the child within you didn't hear feedback. The child heard rejection, and so the child adapted. You became what was praised. Trimmed away what was judged. You learned to read faces like maps, tones like warnings, silence like disapproval. You developed the skill of self-editing before you even understood you were doing it. And without realizing it, you stopped being yourself, not dramatically, but quietly, gradually, one compromise at a time. Then came comparison. You watched who was loved easily and who was punished. You learned which traits were celebrated. Maybe the quiet child was called good, while the expressive child was told to calm down. Maybe achievement earned affection, so you learned to chase accomplishments instead of joy. Maybe obedience earned safety, so you learned to suppress your voice. Maybe independence made someone close to you uncomfortable. Maybe softness made someone feel threatened. Whatever the story was, it taught you this: my worth is conditional, and once that belief takes root, it becomes the script your entire life follows. Now here you are, an adult, with dreams, depth, intelligence, sensitivity, insight, but inside you still lives the child who believes that to disappoint someone is to risk being unloved. Inside you still lives the child who fears being fully seen, because being seen once felt dangerous. Inside you still lives the child who performs instead of expresses. That child is not weak. That child adapted to survive. But survival patterns do not create fulfillment. What once protected you is now suffocating you. You are not strange for caring how others see you. You are not weak for wanting to be understood. You are not unreasonable for feeling the sting of judgment. Your nervous system is responding to an old story, a story in which love could be earned or lost. But that story is outdated now. You are no longer a child. You are no longer small. You do not need to bargain for belonging. You do not have to earn the right to exist as yourself. You learned to seek approval because it was the safest thing you could do. But safety has changed forms. The safer path now is honesty. The safer path now is authenticity. The safer path now is returning to the self that was buried under other people's expectations. The healing begins not with force, but with recognition, the approval seeking. Identity was learned, and what is learned can be released. There is a moment in the journey where something strange becomes clear. The more you care about what others think, the more convinced you become that everyone is watching you. But they're not really. The mind creates an audience that does not exist. It convinces you that your actions are being analyzed, your mistakes remembered, your flaws recorded. It tells you that every word you speak echoes longer than it does. This is the ego's greatest illusion, the belief that you're at the center of other people's attention. The ego is not arrogant, it is afraid of being seen in the wrong way, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of being exposed. And so it builds a world where the only way to stay safe is to be approved of. Yet here is the truth you rarely hear. Most people are not thinking about you. They are thinking about themselves, their worries, their insecurities, their self-image, their possible mistakes, their failures, their longing to be accepted. Every person you fear is afraid of being judged themselves. Every gaze you interpret is often not a gaze at all, just another human lost in their own mental labyrinth. You are surrounded not by critics, but by people who are also terrified of being criticized. And yet you act as though you are under a spotlight, performing, measuring, adjusting. It is a tiring performance, especially because no one is really watching. Think about the times you've worried about how you looked, how you spoke, how you appeared. Think about the anxiety that bloomed in your chest, the tension in your shoulders, the self-consciousness that sharpened every movement. Now think, how many times do you remember someone else's small mistakes? How many times do you replay the tone of their voice, the exact words they said, the awkward moment they stumbled? Hardly ever, because your mind was busy with you. The same is true for everyone else. The spotlight effect is one of the most powerful psychological illusions we live under. It makes us believe we are being observed more than we actually are. But the spotlight is not real. The audience is imagined. The judgment is internal. Most of the suffering comes not from what others think of you, but from what you think they think of you. You fear reactions that have never happened. You defend yourself from opinions that have never been formed. You shape your life to avoid criticism that has never been spoken. You're running from ghosts. The ego tells you that if you make one wrong move, the world will turn against you. But look back at your life. How many times did the world end because someone disapproved of you? How many times did judgment destroy you? How many times did misunderstanding truly take away what mattered? The pain was real, yes, but did it break you or did it wake you? You survived every time. More than survived, you learned. The fear of judgment is not rooted in reality. It is rooted in memory. The ego protects the child who was once hurt, rejected, dismissed. The ego still believes that rejection equals death. But you are not that child anymore. You do not need the world's permission to be who you are. And if someone does judge you, let them. Judgment says more about the one who speaks it than the one who receives it. People project their insecurities onto others without even realizing it. Their approval is not purity. Their criticism is not truth. The moment you see the illusion clearly, something shifts. The tension in your body loosens, the performance fades, the world becomes less threatening. You begin to live not as someone being watched, but as someone simply alive. You are not on stage. You are not being graded. You are a human being moving through a world of others who are just as uncertain, just as sensitive, just as vulnerable as you are. No one is watching the way you think they are. The world is not evaluating you. The world is busy surviving itself. And in that realization, there is freedom. There is a particular kind of peace that arrives when you stop performing and begin simply being. It does not come suddenly. It does not rush into your life like fireworks or revelation. It comes gently, the way dawn replaces night, slowly, naturally, without needing to force anything. At first, you may not even notice the shift. You'll speak and realize you did not rehearse your words. You'll walk into a room and notice your body did not tense. You'll say no without guilt. You'll say yes without fear. And one day you'll laugh, really laugh, from the center of your being. And it will feel like oxygen returning to your lungs after years of shallow breathing. This is what it feels like to live unapologetically, not careless, not defiant, not aggressive, simply whole. When you stop caring about what people think, You don't become insensitive. You become sincere. You stop trying to manage perception and instead allow presence. You stop shaping yourself into what would make sense for others and instead become someone who makes sense to yourself. Living unapologetically is not loud. It is not about declaring your truth to the world. It is not about convincing anyone of anything. It is quiet. It is grounded. It is steady. It is walking through life without asking for permission to exist. It is standing in your own presence, not as a performance, but as a homecoming. You begin to notice that the people who truly resonate with you are the ones who show up when you are not performing, the ones who stay when you are honest, the ones who feel like ease rather than effort. You no longer chase, impress, prove, or negotiate. You don't need to. You realize that the right people do not need to be convinced, and the wrong people cannot be convinced. And the most beautiful part is that you stop needing everyone to stay. You stop needing to be chosen because you have already chosen yourself. When you choose yourself, the fear that once controlled you begins to dissolve. The fear of being misunderstood loses its grip because you no longer require understanding to feel worthy. The fear of being disliked fades because you no longer measure your value by how others respond. The fear of being alone softens because you realize that solitude and loneliness are not the same. Solitude is the space where your spirit breathes. Loneliness is what you feel when you abandon yourself to avoid disappointing others. Freedom, then, is not the absence of judgment. It is the absence of self-betrayal. You will still be judged. You will still be misunderstood. You will still be seen through the lens of someone else's experience, biases, wounds, and projections. But judgment no longer feels like danger because you are no longer a child asking for permission to exist. You are an adult who knows the value of your own being. And when you know your value, the world cannot take it from you. This is the quiet joy of authenticity. You finally meet yourself. Not the version shaped by expectation, not the version edited for approval, the real one. The one who has always been here waiting for your return. And in that return, life begins to feel different. You speak slower. You listen deeper. You move with intention. You choose relationships that nourish rather than drain. You allow space for silence. You allow space for truth. You allow space for peace. And in that space, you realize something profound. You were never meant to live as a reflection of others. You were meant to live as a reflection of your own soul. The world does not need another version of what it already has. It needs you, the you beneath the performance, beneath the fear, beneath the conditioning, the unedited you, the honest you, the free you. So now, take a breath, feel the weight that is no longer yours, let it go, step back into yourself. This is the beginning of a life that is truly lived from within. This is where you stop being who you were taught to be and become who you actually are. Welcome back to yourself. Take a moment now, not to think, but to feel. Feel the space inside your body that has been quiet for years. The part of you that has always known the truth, even when you were afraid to live it. The part that does not need to be explained, justified, defended, or proven. The part that simply is. You do not have to become anything. You do not have to earn your place. You do not have to convince the world that you are worthy of being here. You already are. Your existence is your permission. Your being is your belonging. The journey from seeking approval to choosing yourself is not linear. Some days you will forget. Some days the old patterns will return. That is okay. Healing is not about never falling back. It is about remembering more quickly each time who you are beneath the noise. When you notice yourself beginning to perform again, pause, breathe, return. You do not need the world to understand you in order to be whole. You only need to recognize yourself. And remember this, you are allowed to be misunderstood. You are allowed to disappoint people. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to choose yourself. even when others don't understand why. Because the life that is truly yours will only begin when you stop living for theirs. So take a deep breath. Let the shoulders drop. Let the jaw soften. Let the heart open just a little. You are no longer fighting yourself, you are coming home. And home has been waiting for you for a very long time.